Hello, Georgette Gankars here, and I want to show you today we're going to do a simple painting, and we're going to do it in a style where it's going to have lots of texture. So it's going to be an Impressionist style with lots of texture, and let me show you some examples of what I mean. We're going to start with the water. I'm just going to do simple strokes, and you're going to practice them, in the studio and at home. And then I'm going to show you how to do an Impressionist painting. And with the Impressionist painting, I'm going to start with watercolors, and then you can do it with oils and acrylics also. But I'm using this brush for watercolors. It's a smaller brush. It's hog hair. It's very texturized. And for the acrylics and the oils, I'm using a larger brush. And you can see it's a hack, and it's a little texturized here. And then I have just a small, it's like a number 10 brush, but they're all texturized brushes. They're not synthetic or smooth. I have my regular watercolor palette here, and I'm going to do acrylics. But let me show you some examples of water. So this is very Impressionist-like. You can see the sky has lots of movement, and you can see all those little strokes up close. The same for this one, where the light is being brought down. And these are all demos that I did online. If you saw my painting at the Mary Hill Museum, right, and you can see the strokes, and all this color here is just being brought down into the water, okay? And the colors from the buildings also were reflected in the sky and the water. This was another demo I did here, and you can see the colors of the sky. I'm going to put more blues here and change this, but this area, it's kind of crimson and just a little bit of pink and some browns, and that's going to be brought down into the water on the side of the boat. But I want to show you the strokes. They're moving. You can see that the boat is kind of going through here. I'm going to have another little boat back here that made that texture. This is a monochromatic piece that I haven't finished, but you can see the structure of this building, and everything here is kind of watery, right? Because it's moving, it's blurry. I'm going to finish this, but it's a different type of water. And this was also one of the smaller paintings that I did plein air in Krakow, Poland. And you can see the background of this sky happened to be like a red earth, a little bit of brown. I covered this up with a blue and a white, and I brought those colors down as a reflection into the water. And I have the colors from the building brought into the water and the green from the sky. So it's about 95 degrees here, but I have to unfortunately leave. I have to have the windows closed, and I can't have on the air conditioning because you won't be able to hear me in the video. So I have to fan myself here. But I do want to show you this. So we're going to start. This is the watercolor. Let's move it here. And what I'm going to do is dip my brush in my water, and I'm going to wipe it off on my rag. Let's move this so you have a better view here. Okay, so you can pretty much see the canvas. Let's move this here. So I'm going to show you a couple of washes, and we're going to start with the blue first. And like I said, we're going to do the watercolors. So I think I'm going to start with a cerulean. I could have, started with ultramarine, but let's just start with the cerulean. And I want to show you with the watercolors, I really don't have a lot. I just have a little bit on my brush. And what I'm going to do is we already did these washes as far as the video for the sky. So I'm not really going to go into that. I'm just going to show you a water wash. So I'm taking my brush, dipping it in my cerulean blue, wiping it off on my rag, and I'm just going across. And when I go lightly across, I kind of get these strokes. And I'm just showing this to you for students that don't have a fan brush. And you can get these strokes, you see, for water right away. And obviously, if you dip your brush in the water and you go back and you're picking up more watercolor, right, you can make those strokes darker. Okay, so this is a way where you can see that I've added blue wash at the same time, but also did the strokes. And they're very light, they're not heavy, they're not apparent. So practice doing that, and I'll show you again. Okay, and it depends if your watercolor paper, if you wet your watercolor paper first, right? You would tape it down. This is just loose, but you would tape it down and mat it on the side. But if I add more water, this is what happens to those strokes. So you can see the difference. The first one is rough, and this is really texturized at the top. I can go ahead and I can go with more paint. Now I didn't dip my brush in the water this time. I just picked up my blue watercolor paint here, and I'm just going on top of the wash, and I keep doing that. I'm just picking up pure paint now. I don't have that much water, and I'm doing this, and I get these wonderful texturized strokes. So you can see how drastically and how fast you can do that, right? I'm doing these strokes really big. You can use a smaller brush. I just want you to be able to see it on camera. So again, the first one was light and texturized. The second one we built up. And again, we started with a wash, and then we just kept adding more of our paint. We added more and more blue. We didn't dip the brush in water at all when we did that. In the beginning we did. So let's do it again. So let's just say, we have these strokes. This is another type where here we have white in between. Do you see that? We left those white areas. Now I'm going to dip my brush in my water, and I'm just going to, I wiped it off on the rag, and I'm going on top, and I'm just blending it, and now I get this. So you can see there are three different types of strokes, right? The first one is kind of just rough, right? A little bit of water, but dragging it across the paper. The other one started as a wash, where we had a brush and water, wiped it off on a rag, picked up the color, and then we just started picking up more blue without the water. So we got these darker strokes, and this is kind of a combination. So there's three different types of strokes here, and we can drastically change them. Now if I go back and I pick up blue and I watercolor on the end of my brush, and I do not wet it again with water, I can go back over and I can just drag those strokes across, and it just gets a little bit heavier. So you see those are three different types of strokes. Of course, we talked about doing this when you want to do water with the watercolors. You could also use a fan brush, so it kind of looks like this. So you kind of dip it in your water, and I'm going to pick up a little bit on the end of my brush with the watercolors, and I'm just going to go like this really fast. I'm going to practice making these kind of strokes, and you can see they're very thin. If I want more to them, I can just go over them. I can bring more water into the brush, and I kind of get that. And with the fan brush, you can see how fast you can make those strokes, and you can also make them thick. And it's basically the same thing, if you're using acrylics or oils, it doesn't matter. You can feather them, and you can go really wild, right? You can also use the edge of a brush. You dip it in your solvent. It doesn't matter if it's acrylic, oils, or watercolors. You're just going to dip it in your solvent. So for your solvent, for the oils, it might be a little bit of terp. And for the watercolors, it would be water. And for the acrylics, it would be water. And you see how I have, this is a more of a synthetic brush, but it's very thin at the end. And I'm going to kind of do the same kind of thing. And I'm going to feather this back and forth like this. And whenever my brush gets too hard to move across the canvas, I'm going to, put in another color. And very fast, I can build up those water strokes. So these are different ways to do water. I want you to practice them at home. If you have the watercolor paper, practice wetting the paper first, mounting it down first to a surface. You just don't want to wet the paper without mounting it, as we spoke in the class. I showed you how to do that with the tape and the clipboard. Um, and then practice it wet on wet, and then practice it with the watercolor paper being dry and just putting your wet brush on top. So there is a difference between wet and wet, wet and dry. And you can do it with the oils and the acrylics the same way. You know, if you have oils, you can put a little bit of terp and a tiny bit of terp on your canvas. You know, you can even wipe it, put a tiny bit on the end of your brush, kind of wipe it, saturate into the canvas. Do not put a lot of terp. And then you can go back, pick up a little linseed oil and your color and drag it through. Okay, so terp, a tiny bit on the tip of your brush, and you just put it all on your canvas. So let's move this for now, and I'll show you. If this is my canvas, right, I would pick up a little bit of terp, you know, on the edge, dab it on my rag, move it all the way through so my canvas is semi-wet, not even, just a little bit. And then I would go with my brush and I would dip it in my linseed just a tiny bit and pick up some paint and do the same kind of strokes that we just did. And for acrylics, it would just be dipping your brush in water and wiping it off in your rag and picking up the color. With acrylics, you don't need to wet the canvas or put any kind of water on the canvas at all. Okay, so I just want to make those clear. Now I do want to show you some other stroke that we should move to before, but I want to show you some examples of paintings of what I'm speaking about. Okay, so now we're finished with these this. And what we're going to be doing today is doing paintings like this. So do you see how soft that is? Look at those strokes. Do you see? This was an example that I started in the park with students. So I want to show you how to do that style, that Impressionist style. Let's start with the watercolors first. We have our brush. We're going to dip it in our water. We're going to wipe it off on our rag. And let's just say I pick up a little bit of my permanent green. And I'm going to do it down here so we have a little bit of space. I'm just going to show you. And what you're going to do is dot. Do you see how I'm dotting the paper? That's all you're going to practice, these little dots. And you can come in with another color, like say watercolor yellow. Sorry, this is making noise, but I don't have this mounted down. And you can put the yellow in here, okay? And then we can come in with a darker, watercolor color like phthalo, my pea, phthalo green. And I kind of have it on the back here of my brush. And remember, I'm dipping my brush in the water, wiping it off on the rag. If it's acrylics, I'm dipping in the water, just dabbing it off on the rag. And the same for oils. I might be dipping it in my linseed and dabbing it off on the rag if I need it. Sometimes with the oils, you're not always picking up the linseed. So I'm just showing you this process of where you're just dabbing it and you're just kind of doing this. Okay, it's pretty simple. So let's move now. So practice that, and if you have oils and acrylics, you can do it on watercolor paper. You can still practice. So let me move. I'm going to take away my watercolor palette. And now I'm going to move to my acrylics. And the same process again with the oils. They're both thick paints. And I have my colors here ready to go. Now, for the acrylics, I'm going to use my large brush here. And remember to clean your brushes. Don't leave them sitting in the water, because if you leave them sitting in the solvent, what ends up happening is the ferrule here, that starts loosening from the wood. When the brush is wet, the wood, expands, and then when it retracts, this loosens, and you don't want to do that to your brush. So swirl your brush. Remember to always clean it, on a rag after each application. Don't leave your brushes sitting in water all the time or any solvent. So here we're going to start now, and I'm going to make this out of my head, some kind of painting, and I'm going to start. So I'm dipping my brush in the water. Let's move this, wiping it off on the rag. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up, I'll show you, I'm going to here, and I'm picking it up, and do you see how I'm dabbing it? I'm picking up the color. It's only on the edge here of the brush, and I'm kind of dabbing it on my palette. And the palette is obviously where we mix the paints. Now I'm going to do the same. So I have some tea white and I have some blue on there. I'm just going to dab it. Okay. And I have another brush here, same type of brush. And I'm going to dip my brush in my water. And I think I'm going to pick up a little bit of crimson, maybe a tiny bit of ochre. So I have crimson and ochre on there. And I kind of mix them together here. And I have this on the edge of my brush. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this whole canvas like this, just putting this color down. And when I don't have enough of the color, I'm just going to go back with a little bit of water, right? With your oils, you could go with the turp or the linseed. Then I'm going to take a rag. I'm going to smooth this out just for now. So I have a little bit of the color underneath remaining, but not all of it. So you can see it's a very light wash. And I can build that up thicker if I want to. You know, at this point, I'm going to do it one more time. Okay, same color. I'm kind of just picking that, and I'm only doing it at the top, and then I'm dipping it in my solvent, and I'm just kind of spreading this out. And then I'm going to take my rag here, and I'm just going to move this around here, and I have this like this. It doesn't have to be a super even wash. The next step, I'm going to take my brush that I have blue on, my blue and my tea white. And I want to make sure that if I have a lot of water in there, or whatever solvent I'm using, if I'm dipping it in my turp or my linseed, I don't want it to be dripping and wet. And I'm just going to go over that first wash. You can see I'm just kind of doing this kind of fast here. And when I do it, I'm going like this. And then I change it like this to blend. So I'm just keep picking up more blue, more white, and I'm going across like this. And then to blend it, I'm just going across. It's kind of like if you're sweeping. And I do want some of those, in this painting, I want some of those yellows to show through, okay? And we talked about in class how we're going to have this kind of perfect wash, right? And how we feather the brush back and forth. You can try with the oils, the watercolors, the acrylics, whatever medium that you are using. And now I'm just going to cover this with a little bit of white to just make it a little bit more opaque and kind of blend it a little. So we still have this blue going on, but we see little bits of the yellow coming through. Let's do that. And remember, if you're using oils, this is a process that's going to take time because you want to have those transitions very smooth, and with the oils it stays wet. So you can do this in one application. And I'll show you, it's a more beautiful sky here where we have these blues and we can still see. Let me see if I can pump up the color here, if you can see it. You can see a little bit of that yellow coming through. And this is what I want for this situation. This is just going to be my background. Now I didn't even clean the brush, and I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to pick up my darkest color here, which is going to be some umber. And I have some on the bottom. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go like this. See how I'm dotting that? It's nothing that you can't do. Okay? And then I'm going to pick up a darker green, maybe my phthalo here, and then I have some permanent green mixed with that. So a permanent and a phthalo, and I'm just kind of doing the same thing, and I'm just kind of dabbing it on top of those browns. And you know you're doing a good job, right, when you hear that brush hit the canvas. It's a nice sound. So for those of you that like those videos with the sounds, you know, might like the sound of this brush hitting the canvas, and I kind of have that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and put a little bit more brown on top. I still haven't cleaned my brush, so even if you have watercolors or oils, you're just blending those dark colors directly into there. And the thing is, you want this soft kind of gradation. Now I'm going to go with a little bit of ochre. You can see there. And I'm just going to go basically on top of this green. Now I have 3 layers, or 4, and you see how the green is drastically changing. It's looking a little bit more realistic. And now I have my cad yellow, and I'm going to dab. I'm dabbing it, and I'll show you. I'm dabbing it here. And then I'm going directly on top. And I'm just changing that green a little. I'm going to bring it up in the back here, little bits of it. And I'm dabbing it. I'm leaving these, it looks very soft now. You see how it's getting soft? I'm going to take some tea white on the end, and I'm just going to push it into here. I'm going to spread that over. I'm going to get a little bit more tea white. The idea is you really want all those colors to show. Okay, so now we've got this brown, we've got this, we've got a tea white. Now I'm going to take some more tea white and I'm bring it up here. You can see how nicely it's just blending with these greens in the bottom. Okay, it's just really looking soft. Okay, so let me see if I can see it better like this. Okay, and then I can go back with some yellow. I'm just showing you how you can drastically, have all these colors at once on the canvas. And you're just building up that background. See how soft that is? Okay, so the next thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little brush. I'm going to pick up some white. I'm going to pick up some tea white. And I'm just going to put some clouds maybe here. I can barely see them. Little clouds. Okay, maybe I'll have one over here. I'm going to show you what that looks up close. You can see those clouds. You can see the soft gradation and those colors mixing. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use a smaller brush, same size. We got that number 10 flat. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of my burnt umber. I'm going to mix it with a little bit of cad yellow and a spot of white. And the thing is, I kind of want to have this gray, but I want to have a grayish brown, right? So because we want all of this to be light. So let's put a tree like over here. Let's pretend that we have this tree coming down, okay, and it's coming here. And we're just doing this wet on wet, so it doesn't matter if we bring up a little bit of green in that brush, if we have it. And this is an Impressionist painting, so it's going to be a couple of layers, but we're just doing it really fast. Okay, kind of have that green over here. Let's put a tree here, I guess. You can just build it up real fast. You can see I kind of have this going on. Maybe there's a branch or something going on here. Just going to leave it like that. And then maybe we have one going here. It's coming down. It's going all the way up. You can see it's picking up the white, and I want it to do that because I want it very soft. Now, we just have these 3 trees. Maybe we have another one coming here. Let's build another one like here. Okay, so now we have these very soft brown barks, and we're going to build them up later. This is just our basis of our start. Now I'm going to take that same brush, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a little bit of permanent green and some yellows and a little bit of my dark phthalo green. You could use a sap green if you want, hooker's green, and I'm just dotting it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just moving the brush around, and do you see how I'm just, let's move it away closer so you can see. I'm just kind of dabbing this, and I'm moving the brush like this, and I want to pick up a little bit of that color underneath. So if you have your watercolor paper, you can wet the paper ahead of time if you want a softer softer transition. And I'm just kind of dabbing this, and this would be kind of your step 1 here. You can see how soft those trees look. You know, they're kind of, let's make this one a little bit darker. I put a lot of dark color in here, and I'm just moving this brush around, and I kind of have this going on. And I can go back, you know, and I can add brown in here if I want. And again, you just practice of how you're going to be moving your brush like this, moving it like this, pretending I'm painting, not painting on you, but this is what I'm doing to the canvas. You see, we got some yellows in here, and I have to do it while it's wet on wet because it blends really nice. It's really nice when you have the white mixed with it. You know, if you have watercolor paper, again, you want to wet it so you get that really nice soft transition. And you're just practicing how to do, at this point, just 3 different trees. You know, you could add colors or change the color as you want to the tree. Pick up some more greens, pick up some whites. Maybe one tree is going to be, you know, red with red leaves. Maybe you're doing a fall scene. I don't know. But what it is just practicing those soft strokes and putting them on where you have this kind of impressionist feel. And if you do have oils and acrylics, you can add the white. If you have the watercolor paper, you can wet it and mat it down. But I do want you to practice this, okay? And do it, and you keep building it up, and you kind of have this. Then you can work, you notice I haven't cleaned my brush. Then I can work with the shadows. Maybe there's, you know, this darker brown shadow that's going around this tree. But you have to do it again when it's wet on wet, because even when you're doing it, like I said, we started with the watercolors. Your paper has to be wet, your canvas has to be wet. The good thing is the oils will be wet, so you can just kind of lightly do this and they will blend. And with the acrylics, you know, if you're working this fast, you will start to see them blending, and you can start building up those shadows. If you want to, you know, this area to be lighter, you can put more of a lighter color and have a contrast. But the secret is to make the canvas yours, okay? And I'll show you what I mean. I'm gonna start putting some light areas down here. Like if these were leaves that were falling from the tree. Don't be afraid to press and just really build that canvas up. And, you know, I tell students all the time, put on some music. Do what makes you happy when you're painting. You know, if you got some good thoughts, maybe you were thinking about the night that you had before when you were out with your friends, or maybe you're by yourself, whatever you were doing. Try to think, of things. If you're not, like when the students are painting plein air, obviously they have the wonderful scenery there with them. But when you're painting at home, if you're practicing like this, you want to, kind of put yourself in that mood. So I'll show you these strokes up close, and you're going to keep building it. And you can see all those colors in there. And with the watercolors or the acrylics or the oils, it's the same exact step. It's pretty easy. You just have to do it wet on wet, right? So again, for the watercolor paper, you can wet it and mat it down, and then do it with your brush, or you can do it on dry watercolor paper. It doesn't matter. You don't have to have the watercolor paper wet. If you do it on dry watercolor paper, you'll get more of a texture. And the same for these oils and acrylics. But now I'm just doing this. You can see I'm working wet on wet, and I'm just really softening this. So I would just build this up. And again, I'm just going to put on a light color so you can see how what would happen here and how light that looks. And then how we can just press hard and it just blends in like magic. It just becomes a part of that landscape. Let's do it with a shadow. So I still haven't cleaned my brush. Let's see, I'm bringing in some dark. I can bring that dark in here, and I can just, blend it, and I can make a rock here if I wanted to. Maybe it's going to be a tree and a rock. So practice again doing that, practice building up your areas in the canvas, practice changing it. That's how you really learn. Like, this is a rock, maybe you don't want the rock to be there. Maybe you just go and you put something else. You see, like flowers or something on top. Maybe this is going to be a colorful area. And then the more that you build up your canvas here with all these colors, then you can go back with a smaller brush, and then you can start doing the detail wet on wet. Say, for an example, you want to pull in these areas and make them a little bit darker, these branches. You can do that, and you have to think, okay, well, this one's, is this closer to me? Is this further away? Maybe this one is the closest, so I might put a little bit of brown. Where is the light falling? Is the light on that side? Maybe the shadows are here. Maybe this is the darker side. And you want to just slowly then start building up those trees, okay? And bringing in, then I would use another smaller brush and go in here with the lights, okay? But practice this. It's really going to be fun. You can really build it up. And I would say do it for like about half an hour. Keep your brush wet. Keep changing the colors. Don't be afraid. I'll show you my palette when I'm dipping in here. I'm just dipping from one color into another color and then dabbing it off. And you get all these beautiful lush colors. And we can change, the edge of where this meets for a little bit more contrast where the tree is. Maybe you have to think about where the lights are in the tree, where the shadows are. So practice that, and I'll see you in class. Ciao.